Yeah, so we are good to go. So welcome all of you. Good evening. Welcome to another live problem solving session for the course Introduction to Semiconductor Devices, which is being conducted by Professor Naresh Kumar Imani from IIT Hyderabad. Just to introduce myself again, I am Soham Lakote, currently a fourth year PhD student at IISc Bangalore, working under Professor Gaurav Banerjee in the area of analog and RF circuits and systems. Right, so just for the formality sake, we will have one session of 50-60 minutes, then we will take a short break and we will resume the session. And just for the sake of again the formality, most of the diagrams that have been taken which are not cited, either they are from the Donald Niemann's book, or many of the diagrams that I have taken are directly the snapshots of the lecture material. Apart from these two, from wherever sources I have taken the diagrams, I have cited them at the bottom of the diagram. And I hope all of you are able to access the recordings as well as the lecture slides. So this is the YouTube channel where all the videos are being actually uploaded, and in the description section of each video you will be able to find the link for the presentation folder where you will be able to find all the lecture notes. Okay, so now we won't waste a lot of time in the theory, because I know you guys have a exam coming on the coming Sunday. So I just want to cover some problems. There are not a very good problems to be covered for this particular week, but I do have some few problems, and we won't waste a lot of time in the theory for this particular session, because I want to cover as many numericals as possible. Correct. So what we have studied are nothing but LEDs and the lasers. Correct. So now just to tell you once again, the next 2-3 slides have been taken from the last material itself, the last lecture material itself. So we should not forget the need for these optoelectronic devices. Correct. So let me just turn on the laser pointer. Yeah, so what did I say? All of you must have heard about this ChatGPT. Now this is currently hosted in the Microsoft Azure's data center that is currently present in the Texas, US, correct? And if you look into this data center, you will see all these racks that are present and they are connected. That is output from one of the servers, that is this machine that you are seeing over here. It is being connected to another one. Again, the same cascading fashion has been shown over here. So now what is happening over here is there are to train this ChatGPT, it almost used like 2,85,000 processor cores and 10,000 GPU cards. Correct. So now, since there is a lot of data that is going to flow between multiple processors and the GPUs, or between the processor and the memory, right? That data transfer has to be at a very high speed. Correct. Now this speed is almost, I'm talking about gigabits per second, 20, 30, 40, even 50 gigabits per second. Now your traditional copper lines cannot give you such a high bandwidth. Correct. The only thing that we know currently that can support such a high data rate is nothing but the optical fiber. Correct. Though electrical signals are running over here, if I want to transfer the signal from here to here, I am using this optical fiber cable because it gives me that much bandwidth. That is, it supports that much data rate. Correct. So now if I have an optical fiber, then I have to make sure that my electrical signal is getting converted to the light signal, and again at this end the light signal should be getting converted back into the electrical signal. Correct. So the last time we had studied about the photo detectors, which does this processing of converting light energy into electrical energy. Now I want to also look at this function, right, where I will convert the electrical energy into the light energy. Correct. So now this is what we studied in this week. Correct. So this is just the what you can say, the flowchart diagram of what I have just told you. Like, since there is going to be huge generation of data, that large data needs to be moved very quickly. So now before studying and diving deep into the LEDs, we also studied something called as the lattice matching. Correct. So now why did we study the lattice matching? So we said that, okay, we knew some materials, right? We knew germanium. What is the band gap? Around 0.68 eV. Then we knew about silicon, maybe 1.12 eV. We also knew about gallium arsenide. Its band gap is close to 1.42 electron volts. But what should I do if I want a band gap that is present in between? Correct. What do I mean by that? All of us have studied this concept, right? This is my EC, this is my EV. If this is a direct band gap material, I will just highlight as direct band gap material. Correct. If this electron has to fall back to the valence band, correct, and has to emit a photon, correct, then the wavelength of the emitted photon, right? It will be nothing but Hc divided by Eg. All of us know this very well now, correct? Because sir has repeated this multiple times, and also we have seen this during the last doubt solving session as well, correct? So now what should I do if I want to have a LED made up of which is transmitting what you can say, which is transmitting at a particular wavelength, but corresponding to this wavelength there is no naturally occurring material which can provide me that band gap, correct? So I have to do something in between, correct? So what did we say? We started to rely on the concept of mole fraction that we had studied in the class 11th and 12th chemistry, correct? The mole fraction is nothing but if you have gallium arsenide and you have a gallium phosphide, you just combine both of them, correct, and assign x over here and assign 1 minus x over here, correct? So now what did we say? When we started tuning the x, correct, we also got the tuning in the band gap, right? And that's how we started realizing the band gaps which were not available readily, that is from the gallium arsenide or from the silicon or from the germanium or from other compound semiconductor materials, correct? So we started to rely on the concept of that mole fraction, correct? So now what is the relation of this lattice matching with this? See, to have this material with me, correct, to have this material, since this is not occurring naturally, what I have to do, I have to grow this material on top of some substrate, correct? I have to grow this material on top of some substrate, and there are some standard substrates that are available with me, correct? So now how did we grow? There is a process, sir must have told you, called as epitaxial growth, correct? You grow this layer of this gallium GaAs and P on top of this substrate using the epitaxial growth, correct? And this is what has been shown in the next slide. You have a substrate over here, just ignore this buffer layer as of now, this has some different purpose, correct? And on top of this you grow this kind of layer, correct? Now what I have to ensure from the material science engineering, or from the, if you try to connect to different materials which are having different lattice constant. Why different lattice constant? Because this has Eg1 and this has Eg2, correct? Both of them will form their own crystal structures, correct? So now they will have different lattice constant. Now if you try to grow this epitaxial layer on top of this substrate, now what is going to happen? If you just look, just a minute, somebody wants to join. If you just look at this particular part D along the column, this was my substrate layer, correct? This was my substrate layer. Now this, let's say this is lattice constant A1, this is lattice constant A2. From the diagram itself you can see that the lattice constant of the layer that I want to grow on top of the substrate is higher than A1, correct? So now when I try to join them, right, when I try to join them, the what is going to happen, these things, this lattice constants that you are seeing over here, these bonds that are present, so now what is going to happen, this distance will try to shrink, correct? This distance will try to shrink, and now if this lattice constant is too much higher, for example if A2 is much greater than A1, then what is going to happen, then your ultimate crystal that you will be seeing, it will be actually having some kind of distortions in between. So what do I mean by that? So now if you look at this particular section, correct, if you look at this particular section, you can see there is no bonding, that, just a minute, yeah, you are seeing this atom over here, corresponding to it there is no bonding, that is happening on the top, correct? There is no bonding that is happening on the top, correct? So that means what, it is not getting bonded to the, what you can say, this layer, maybe this layer is, let's say, gallium GaAs1 minus X and Px, correct? So there is no bonding, and let's say this substrate material is maybe gallium arsenide, correct? So there is no bonding that is happening between this what you can say, this particular dot that you are seeing over here with these two dots that are present on the top. So now this will leave some kind of distortions and it will produce some kind of strain. It will, apart from this, there may be insertion of some kind of impurities in between, just like this, correct? So now there are some crazy things that are going to happen, and now if you use this kind of layer, that has been grown on top of this substrate, do you know what is going to happen? See, since this does not have any bonding with the top over here, this dot that you're seeing over here, so now where will its energy fall? So if I just draw EC and dV, correct, for the EV, what do we say? These are nothing but the electrons that are present in the covalent bond, and they have not been broken. They are not free to move. Correct. Now similarly, if I draw this for here, if I draw an energy level corresponding to this particular side, it will fall somewhere in between the forbidden energy band gap. Now what is going to happen because of that? The electron which was supposed to jump from the EC to EV to emit a photon, with energy h mu, correct? This h mu, the lambda corresponding to this h mu can be calculated by hc divided by eg, correct? Now this electron may get trapped over here. Why trapped? Because of course there is no bond that is present over here. That electron can come and just form a bond because this bond is missing over here, correct? And because of that, this is not a, what you can say, this is not a radiative process, correct? There is a recombination happening, and it is a trap assisted recombination. I will just write this word, trap assisted recombination. And trap assisted recombination reduces the internal quantum efficiency. I hope you must have heard about this internal quantum efficiency during the lectures, right? So this internal quantum efficiency is nothing but the metric to present how efficient your LED is actually, correct? So now see, there are two things. One is there are two kind of recombinations. One is radiative and another is non-radiative, correct? Radiative recombinations leads to the generation of photons, but this non-radiative recombination, they lead to heat dissipation in the lattice. They lead to something called as heat dissipation in the lattice, and I don't want this because my ultimate aim is to design a good LED, correct? So these traps are never good, and we don't want these traps to hinder with our operation, correct? So that's why we cannot have a very wide lattice mismatch, and we want to have a substrate and the layer which I want to grow on top of substrate to have as close lattice matching as possible. And this layer, who is deciding it? It is being decided by the wavelength of the light that you want to emit out of your LED, correct? And we will also see how to choose these materials, correct? So these consequences of these impurities I have already explained. They lead to trap assisted recombinations which are non-radiative in nature, correct? And they will reduce the efficiency, correct? So I hope these consequences are also clear. Now coming to a very important part about this question is normally very favorite and usually a favorite for in the exams as well, correct? So how to choose the material and the substrate. So now this graph sir must have shown you in the lectures as well. So I will just quickly go over what this graph is. So on the x-axis you are seeing the lattice constant, but different materials have been highlighted over here, correct? Different materials have been highlighted over here. On this y-axis you are seeing the band gap energy, and on this side of y-axis you are seeing the wavelength, correct? Now what is my job? I want to design an LED. What are the specs? I want to design an LED to emit a light at a particular wavelength, lambda, correct? So now a spec will be given to you that I want to generate a light at a particular wavelength, lambda maybe close to 1.5, correct? Now what is your job? So what you are seeing over here is there are different materials that have been highlighted, and you are seeing different curves that are present, correct? So this indirect band gap that you are seeing, these dotted lines all over here, these are of no interest to me, because you know, the reason I moved from silicon to gallium arsenide or gallium phosphide, correct? The entire reason of this is because it gives me a very good recombination between the electrons and the holes. Now why does this happen? It is because of the direct band gap nature, correct? There needs to be no involvement of the phonon, because I don't need a momentum assisted recombination, correct? If I have a silicon, then that recombination is very poor. Most of it will be dissipated in the heat, in the form of heat in the lattice itself, correct? So now this recombination that I am talking about, electron jumping from conduction to valence band over here, correct? So this has to be a direct recombination, and for this to happen, my EK diagram should look something like this, correct? The valley over here and the top over here, they should exactly overlap, and this can only happen in the direct band gap semiconductors, correct? So that's why you are seeing there is no silicon that is present over here. Now how to solve problems using this diagram is to, okay, if I want to have a light of 1.5 micrometer wavelength, you just draw a horizontal line. Just draw a horizontal line corresponding to this 1.5 micrometer, correct? And now what material you have to choose, it depends on whether there is a corresponding substrate available at the bottom. What do I mean by that? So if you take this particular point, what is this? What is this point, guys? So this is nothing but aluminium 1 minus X, indium X, and SB. Correct? This is this particular curve that I am talking about. Now, if I just take a projection of this point on the x-axis, you can see there is no substrate available to me over here. Correct? There is no substrate that is available to me. The problem with this is the lattice mismatch is going to be very huge between the substrate and the layer that I want to grow to design an LED which will give me a light of wavelength 1.5 micrometer. Correct? Now I will come to the next point maybe. Correct? Now if I come to this particular point over here, what you can see is if I just project it on the downwards, you can see there is a readily substrate that is available to me. Correct? GASB. So what does this suggest? So this tells me that what is this line? This line is nothing but gallium X, aluminium 1 minus X, and SB. Correct? So what does this say? This says to me that, hey, if you can take this layer, if you design your LED using this particular material, correct, then it has the potential to generate a light of 1.5 micrometer wavelength. Correct? Now corresponding to this, you also have a substrate of GASB available to you. Correct? So on top of this GASB, correct, if I grow this layer of GX AL1 minus X SB, correct, the lattice mismatch is going to be really good. So that means there are going to be less impurities that will be present in that is the energy states that I told you about. Correct? These energy states I was talking about. Correct? These are coming because of the traps, and those traps are coming because of the poor lattice matching. Correct? So I will avoid those traps because of the good lattice matching, and at the same time I can generate a light which is close to 1.5 micrometer wavelength. Correct? So that's how you need to solve these questions, and we will solve two such questions so that this concept is absolutely clear, because this graph is one of the most important graphs that you will be able to see in any book or any what you can say course related to the optoelectronic devices. Correct? So now based on this understanding, I hope till this point it is very much clear. Please feel free to poke me at any point. Okay, so now we will take this first question. A graduate student wants to fabricate a red LED which is emitting a light at a wavelength of 650 nanometers. Referring to the data given in the figure number 2, so this is figure number 2, which compound will you suggest him or her to choose? Correct? So now this is the question that we have. Now based on what we have learned just one slide back, correct? So now let's try to solve this question. So what did I say? Corresponding to 650 nanometer, first of all draw a horizontal line. This is my 650 nanometer point over here. I will just draw a horizontal line like this. Correct? I will just draw a horizontal line like this. Now what I'm seeing over here is that if I take this particular point, correct, I can project it downwards over here. Correct? Also, if I take this particular point, I can also project this downwards. Correct? I can also project this downwards. Now the problem with this point is I got 2 points, right? I got 2 points, and what are these 2 points? So this point, let me highlight it as point number A, and this point, let me highlight it as point number B. Corresponding to point number A, what material I have? So this is nothing but aluminium X, indium 1 minus X, and P. So this is the material that I have. Correct? And coming to point number B over here, correct? If you look, this is the material that I have. How I am judging the material? This is gallium phosphide over here, correct? This is gallium phosphide, and over here I have indium phosphide. So now it is a combination of this gallium, indium, and phosphorus over here. So that's how I got this gallium GaX, ion 1 minus X, and P. So corresponding to point number B, I have GaX, ion 1 minus X, and P. Now what did I say? So I need to have as close lattice matching as possible and some substrate has to be available on the x-axis. Correct? Corresponding to point number A, if I draw a projection on the x-axis, there is the nearest substrate that I have is this INP on the right side and this gallium arsenide on the left side. Correct? You can still see there is a good amount of distance between this point and this particular point over here. So the lattice matching is not good. But if I draw a projection of this point B on the x-axis, I can see there is a gallium arsenide exactly available at the bottom. Correct? So what can I do over here? I can take this particular point, right? What is this material? GaX, indium ion 1 minus X and P. This material will allow me to get a light of wavelength 650 nanometer, correct? And apart from this, it also has a substrate available for the purpose of the lattice matching, correct? This is gallium arsenide, and on top of this I can definitely grow a layer of GaX, ion 1 minus X and P, correct? So the lattice match is also going to be very good. So this option will be rejected because the lattice matching is not going to be good. You can see this distance, right? The arrows that I have highlighted over here, you can see this point is at some finite distance with respect to this point. So the lattice matching is not going to be that good, and you will definitely get some impurity states in the forbidden energy band gap, which will reduce the efficiency of your LED. Correct? So that's why we will be going with this particular option to design the red LED. Correct? So the option number B is correct over here. I hope this is very much clear. If you guys have any doubts, please feel free to poke me at any point, okay? Because this is really important. Now coming to question number 2, it is related to the same question again, the previous question. Now his or her advisor wants to know why he or she chose the given material. Support your answer with the proper justification. So the answer that we gave was, of course, it was first of all, it was able to give me a light of wavelength 650 nanometer, and apart from this, correct, apart from this, it also had a substrate available for the purpose of lattice matching, correct? So first of all, the substrate is lattice matched to the gallium arsenide, correct? So the substrate is lattice matched to the gallium arsenide. So this first option seems to be correct. Even in the third option, it is given that it is lattice matched to the gallium arsenide substrate. Now how to judge whether it is a direct band gap or indirect band gap? These dotted lines that you are seeing over here, this corresponds to a region of indirect band gap semiconductor, and I am not at all interested in it, correct? Because the whole reason of why I moved to gallium arsenide and all to design the LEDs, because of their direct band gap nature compared to the silicon, which is indirect band gap material, correct? So this line is continuous. You are seeing this line is continuous. It is not highlighted in the dotted fashion, correct? So this is a direct band gap, correct? The material, whatever you are designing, what material I am talking about? Gallium X, ion 1 minus X and phosphorus, correct? So this material is still remaining as a direct band gap material, correct? And at the same time it is being lattice matched to the gallium arsenide, correct? So now this indirect band gap option is incorrect. So only this option is remaining correct, correct? So this option number 1 is correct, that the suggested material is lattice matched to the gallium arsenide substrate and it is a direct band gap semiconductor for X equal to 0.5. Now how did you get this X equal to 0.5? So now this is GAP, correct? So at this particular point, if I just want GAP, if I substitute X equal to 1 over here, what will I get? I will get gallium phosphide. If I substitute X equal to 0, what will I get? I will get indium phosphide. So this point that you are seeing, it is this point corresponds to X equal to 1. This point over here that you are seeing INP, indium phosphide, this point corresponds to X equal to 0. So this point that you are seeing over here, if you just guess it approximately, since this is X equal to 1, this is X equal to 0, so over here somewhere X equal to 0.5 will be there at this particular point. That's why they have given X equal to 0.5 over here, correct? I hope this question is very much clear. Please feel free to poke me at any point. I may not be able to read the chat section if you guys have any doubts, okay? Now coming to another question, that is problem number 3. Now in the last question we designed an LED to work at to emit the light to emit the red light, right? Which was of the wavelength of 650 nanometer. Correct. Now let's design an LED to emit a yellow light, correct, at a wavelength of 575 nanometer. Correct. So now what will I do? I will just take help from you guys, and you guys will be helping me to solve this question now, because I've already solved this question in front of you, right? A very similar question. Now I will just give you a starting point. Now 575 is somewhere close to here, correct? It may be somewhere close to here. Just a minute. Yeah, somewhere close to here. So now what did I say? Whatever wavelength light LED you want to design, you first you draw a horizontal line, correct? You first draw a horizontal line like this, correct? Now I am able to see three intersection points. One point is corresponding to this, which I am denoting as point number A. Another point is corresponding to this, which I will be denoting as point number B. There is one more point. And what is this point? Are you able to see this vertical line? This vertical line, correct? You can see it is starting from this AL X IN 1 minus X and P, and now at the other end it has a gallium arsenide, not gallium arsenide exactly, but if you look at this particular point, correct? So this line corresponds to GAX IN 1 minus X and P. So now this point that you are seeing over here in between, this will be a combination of GA IN P. At the same time it will be also a combination of AL also, correct? So this is what has been highlighted over here, correct? I will just write it just to make it very simplified. ALX IN 1 minus X P. From where did this came? It came from here. And now if I move vertically down, correct, I am reaching a new material over here. What is this material? We have already looked at it. It is GAX IN 1 minus X and P. Now if I combine both of them, and if I just remove X and 1 minus X just for now, correct, what I will get? I will have one AL also, I will have a GA also, correct, I will also have an IN, and I will also have a P over here, correct? So you can see this material has been denoted over here, and this arrow has been highlighted like this, correct? So now this intersection, this point that you are seeing over here, I am highlighting it as point number C, correct? I got 3 points now. One point this at this particular location, another point B at this particular location, and another point at this particular location C. Now a very simple question to you guys: if I draw a vertical projection from all these points on the x-axis, correct, so for which particular point there is a substrate that is available on the x-axis? Can you guys please tell me? Among point number A, B and C, if I draw vertical projections on the x-axis, for which of them I have a substrate readily available on the x-axis? Can you please tell me? Just draw a vertical line on from both these 3 points and just tell me. It is very much clear from the diagram itself. If I just take the vertical projections, what do I mean by vertical projections? The projections that I have drawn over here, these vertical projections like this, correct? If I just draw it from point number B, point number C and point number A, that are these 3 points, correct, which of them have a substrate available on the x-axis? I won't be able to move ahead unless and until I get this answer from you guys. Come on. Yes, very good. So from point number C, if I draw a vertical projection, there is a readily substrate available, that is gallium arsenide. So what do I mean by that? If I take this particular point, what is this material? It is aluminum X, gallium 1 minus X, 0.5, indium 0.5, and there is a phosphorus, correct? If I grow this material on top of the gallium arsenide substrate, that it is very much lattice match with respect to this gallium arsenide substrate, correct? But corresponding to point number B and corresponding to point number A, you can see there is no substrate that is directly available on the x-axis. That means if I try to get my LED, that is LED to emit a yellow light by choosing these materials at point B and point A, then there is going to be a lattice matching and that LED is not going to be efficient, correct? So since we have this material with us and it is lattice matched to the gallium arsenide, this is going to be our answer, correct? So I hope it is very much clear. So thanks for giving me these answers. So now what we will do, we will move on to the next problem now this problem corresponds to it's a very simple question and it has been taken from the book Streetman and Banerjee, correct? So now what this question is asking us, if one makes an LED in a semiconductor with a direct band gap of 2.5 electron volts, correct? So let's say this is my EC, let's say this is my EV, and this is what, this is 2.5 electron volts, correct? What wavelength light it will emit, correct? So sir must have told you this. So if you observe a spectrum, right, of the LED, it will max out at near to Eg plus KT by 2. This is the exact value, but if you approximate it, it will be very much close to Eg, correct? It will look something like this maybe, correct? It will look something like this. So this is the point where I will get the what you can say the maximum. This is the wavelength that I will be very much interested in, because this is where the maximum intensity will be coming out to be. And now how these other wavelengths are getting generated, because there also exists some electrons in the upper energy states, correct? So now if this electron decides to jump from this point to this particular point, correct, then this is actually higher than the Eg, correct? This is actually higher than the Eg. Now generally what happens, this probability of happening this is really low. Why this is low? Because normally electron on such a higher level, actually it dissipates its energy as a heat and it comes down to this lower energy state over here, correct? So this combination, this transition from here to here, this is nothing but a heat dissipation, and transition from this particular point to this particular point, now this will emit a photon actually, correct? So now we are only interested in this particular point, correct? So now what wavelength of light it will emit? So we have already seen that this nothing but wavelength can be calculated as Hc divided by Eg, or this can be calculated as lambda in micrometers will be nothing but 1.24 electron volts divided by Eg in electron volts, correct? So now what is the value of Eg? They have given 2.5 electron volts, correct? So 1.24 divided by 2.5. Now if you calculate this, right, so then this lambda in micrometer will be coming out to be 0.496 micrometer. So this is the wavelength of the light that this semiconductor material will emit, correct, when the electrons from the conduction band jumps into the valence band. Now the next question that they are asking me is, can you use it to detect photons of wavelength 0.9 micrometer, correct? So now let's calculate the energy corresponding to photons having a wavelength of 0.9 micrometer. So I will just denote it as part number 2. For lambda is equal to 0.9 micrometer, what will be the energy? So this will be nothing but Hc by lambda, correct? 1.24 divided by lambda in micrometer is 0.9. So this result will come out to be in EV, correct? So now this answer will come out to be around 1.37 electron volts, correct? So what I am doing, this is my semiconductor material having a band gap of 2.5 electron volt. I am trying to incident a photon of energy 1.37 electron volts. I am trying to incident a light having the energy of 1.37 electron volts, correct? Now the problem is, what you can see over here, this band gap that you are seeing, it is wider compared to the energy of the incident light. Correct? So now what will happen over here? What do you think? So this light will cause the electron to jump from the valence band to conduction band, or it will just pass through the semiconductor material? So now I am asking this question to you guys. What will happen? This light has a lesser energy and this semiconductor band gap is actually higher. So now what will happen? Whether this photon, the light, the photons will pass as it is, or it will cause the generation of electron from the valence band to the conduction band. What do you think? A very simple question. Does this photon having an energy 1.37 electron volts, does this have the capability to excite an electron from the valence band to a conduction band inside a semiconductor whose band gap is 2.5 electron volt? Does this photon have a capability to excite the electron?
No, sir.
No, sir, right? Very good. So this does not have the capability. So now this photon will pass as it is through the semiconductor material. This material will act as a transparent to this light, which has the photons of energy 1.37 electron volt. Correct? So can you use it to detect photons? Absolutely no. Now the next question is they are asking, what about zero point 0.1 micrometer? Correct? What about 0.1 micrometer? So now I will just write it over here. For lambda equal to 0.1 micrometer, so the energy, if I try to calculate, right, 1.24 divided by 0.1 micrometer. So now this will come out to be around, if I am not wrong, this will come out to be, I guess, 12.4 electron volts. Correct? It has the energy of 12.4 electron volts. Now this semiconductor material has a band gap of 2.5 electron volt. The energy of the photon is 12.4 electron volt. So not only this photon has the capability to push the electron from the edge of the valence band to the conduction band, what will actually happen is this electron will be pushed to a higher energy level somewhere over here. Correct? And from there this electron will lose its energy in the form of heat and it will come down to its low energy state. Why? Because electrons always likes to occupy lower energy states first. Correct? So I hope this is very much clear. So for 0.1 micrometer, obviously yes, it has the capability to detect the photons. Correct? So I hope this is very much clear. This was a very simple question. Now coming to the part of external quantum efficiency, there is something we studied about the external quantum efficiency, right? So now what did we study about it? So if I have an LED structure with me, correct? If I have an LED structure with me, so now this is nothing but you can consider it as a kind of PN junction only, correct? So now if I am generating photons, somebody wants to join, yeah. So if I am generating the photons all over the place inside the LED structure, now I want to actually detect how many of those generated photons are coming out of the LED structure into the air, right? Because this is where my photons has to go, into the air or either into the optical fiber. Okay, but those photons which are being generated everywhere inside the LED structure, how many of those photons are actually being emitted out of the LED structure either into the optical fiber or either into the surrounding medium, which may be air. Correct? So this is what is quantified by the external quantum efficiency. Correct? So this is what I have written over here, the fraction of generated photons that are actually emitted from the semiconductor. Correct? So now coming to the next point. So the external quantum efficiency is normally a much smaller number than the internal quantum efficiency. We will solve some numericals. This point, just take it for granted as of now. We will solve some one or two very easy numericals and you will see why this statement holds true. Correct. Now the next statement is what are the losses, what are the causes of having a lower external quantum efficiency, that is who is causing the photons to not get emitted out of the led structure, right? So now one of the reasons is, you can see, if the photons are being generated, now since they have to travel they have to travel to the surface first, right, to get emitted out of the led material. If that length is higher, correct, then those photons which are actually generated, they can get reabsorbed in the semiconductor material itself, correct, they can get reabsorbed in the semiconductor material itself. What do I mean by that? So if you have a semiconductor material and let's say this photon, let's say, has been generated over here. Now the moment this h mu comes up, it will again, what it will do, it will give its energy to the electron in the valence band, it will excite it, and this photon will vanish away, correct. So this is one of the reason why the number of photons that I have generated, why all of them cannot get emitted out of the material. This is first reason why there is a loss in the number of photons. The second one is the Fresnel loss, and third one is the critical angle loss. We will look into this, what this Fresnel loss is, correct. So now this is what I was actually talking about. If you talk about the led, just think of it as a p-n junction material, correct. Now where is the recombination happening? See, wherever the recombination from the electron, when it jumps from the conduction band to the valence band, correct, it will emit out a photon, correct. So I need a lot of free electrons to be there. I need a place where these free electrons can see the holes and they can recombine with each other, correct. Now if you take a normal p-n junction, let's say this is p side, let's say this is n side, correct, I will have some depletion region over here, correct. You know, when you forward bias this, p-n junction, what is going to happen? There is going, this potential barrier that you are seeing over here, it is gonna get lowered. There will be an injection of holes, correct, from the p side to the n side, and those holes get decayed in the n type material over here, and their concentration reaches the background carrier concentration. See, these are nothing but minority carriers, right? These are minority carriers inside the n type semiconductor material, correct. This recombination that you are seeing, it is happening everywhere. Similarly, the electrons are being injected from the n side to the p side, and again they will get decayed in the p side material, and their concentration will ultimately reach to background carrier concentration, correct. You can see everywhere inside the semiconductor material the decay is happening, correct. So now photons will be generated everywhere. How many of them can reach the surface and how many of them can actually get out of the surface, correct. This is what will be quantified by the external quantum efficiency, correct. So now this is why I have written, since the photons have been generated everywhere, most of them are actually emitted away from the surface, and they are actually getting reabsorbed in the semiconductor, thus leading to a loss in the number of photons. Now coming to Fresnel loss, I hope you have seen this in the lecture material itself, that see, if you have two materials having different refractive index, correct, what is going to happen? If you incident a wave, there is going to be some transmission and there is going to be some reflection back into the same material, correct. And now this is nothing but quantified by this formula of this which quantifies the fraction of incident photons that are actually reflected back into the semiconductor material, correct. So it is nothing but you take the difference between two refractive indexes, add them, just divide them and just take the square of it, correct. This is nothing but the reflection coefficient. This is nothing but your reflection coefficient, correct. It is actually telling you how many of the photons are actually coming back to they are not going into the other side, they are actually getting reflected back, correct. And we will solve some numericals based on this formula as well. The another loss that may happen, since I have brought this concept of the light and two different mediums, correct. So now you may have studied about the total internal reflection in your school as well, correct. So now what does this say? If the light is incident on the boundary at an angle greater than the critical angle, correct. If I incident a light which is at an angle greater than the critical angle, then that light will not get out of the other side, it will just get totally internally reflected, correct. It will not pass from the other side. So now I also have to, so now why does this become important? Out of all the photons that I have been generated, so for example, out of, let's say this is my LED structure, out of all the photons that are being generated, correct, how many of these photons are actually coming at an angle lesser than the critical angle, correct, because they will be generated at different angles. Now I have to find this, how many of the generated photons now will be incidenting the air to semiconductor interface at angle less than critical angle. Only those photons now will be able to pass through the semiconductor to air interface, correct. I hope it is very much clear. We are not going into this derivation that how many of the photons are coming at an angle lesser than the critical angle, correct. It's a little bit complicated. You can refer to the online materials that are available from different universities across the world, correct. So now this critical angle, again you must have studied, it is nothing but sine inverse of the ratio of two refractive indices, correct. So I hope this is very much clear to you. Now what we'll do, we will just solve few numericals based on this concept. So now again the numerical has been taken from the Donald Niemann book. So what they are asking is, our objective is to calculate the critical angle at a semiconductor to air interface. Consider an interface between gallium arsenide and air. So the refractive index for air is 1, correct. Let me highlight it as N1. For gallium arsenide I have not given you the value, correct. So now the I will just write given over here, correct. For gallium arsenide at wavelength of 0.7 micrometer, the refractive index N2 is close to 3.8, correct. So we got these values now. So this is 3.8 and this is N2. So now they are asking us to calculate the critical angle, correct. So this critical angle is nothing but sine inverse of N1 by N2, correct. This is what you have seen from the formula. So now this will be nothing but sine inverse of 1 divided by 3.8. If we calculate this value, now this value will come out to be 15.3 degree, correct. So what does this mean? So if I just take this quadrants over here, if I just denote a line, maybe something like this, correct. Let's say this is 15.3 degree. So any photons, correct. So only those photons which are actually being incidented in this particular region. What is this? This is air, this is gallium arsenide, correct. Only those photons that are getting incidented from this particular area, only they will be getting transmitted to air now. What about the case where theta is greater than theta c, correct. All of them will be reflected back. All of them will be reflected back. Now this is very much clear. Again a very easy numerical. Now coming to the problem number 7, right. This is one of the most important numericals for today's lecture. So again it has been taken from the Donald Niemann's exercise problems. So now what they are asking is, at a wavelength of lambda equal to 0.7 micrometer, the refractive index of gallium arsenide, which we have seen in the last question, is 3.8, and for gallium phosphide it is 3.2. Consider a material gallium As1 minus X and phosphorus X material with a mole fraction X equal to 0.4. Assuming the index of refraction is a linear function of the mole fraction, determine the reflection coefficient at the gallium As 0.6 and P 0.4 air interface. So now what is this reflection coefficient? We have already seen N2 minus N1 upon N2 plus N1 the whole square. I know the refractive index of air, but what about the refractive index of this material? Correct. So the ultimate aim of this question is to find out the refractive index of this material that they have given to me. Correct. One more thing they have given is that the index of refraction is a linear function of the mole fraction. So refractive index, correct, it is a linear function. Y is equal to mx plus c is a straight line, correct, mx plus c, and x is my mole fraction. Now how to get the values of m and c? See, we have the boundary conditions with me, correct? At x equal to 0, at x equal to 0, my material is what? My material is gallium arsenide. And at x equal to 1, my material is what? Gallium phosphide. And for both of them, I know the refractive index, correct? So let me just substitute over here. For x equal to 0, correct? Now at x equal to 0, my material is gallium arsenide. Gallium arsenide's refractive index is 3.8. So 3.8 is equal to, if I put 0 over here, this will become 0 and I will have a C over here, correct? So I was able to find the value of C. It is 3.8, correct? C came out to be 3.8. This is first from the first boundary condition. Now for x equal to 1, what can I write? X equal to 1, my material is gallium phosphide. For gallium phosphide, the refractive index is 3.2, correct? Then 3.2 will become m into x is 1 over here, correct? M into 1 plus value of C. Value of C is 3.8, correct? So if you just see, then my value of m will be coming out to be minus 0.6, correct? So the final function of the refractive index of this material with respect to the mole fraction will be minus 0.6x plus 3.8. Now what will I do now? See, I want the refractive index of this particular material, correct? So what can I compare? If I just compare this with this, correct? What you can see is x equal to 0.4, correct? X is equal to 0.4. Now if I substitute it back to this equation, my refractive index for this material will come out to be minus of 0.6 into 0.4 plus 3.8. So now the value of N2, this value of N2 will come out to be around 3.56. Correct? I hope it is very much clear. Now what will I do? The ultimate aim is to find out the reflection coefficient, right? So now what I will do, I will substitute this back into the formula of gamma. Gamma will be nothing but N2, which is 3.56 minus air's refractive index is 1 upon 3.56 plus 1 the whole square, correct? So now if you calculate this value of gamma, the reflection coefficient, now this value will come out to be close to 0.315. Correct? So what does this actually mean? So this reflection coefficient of 0.315 actually means that almost 31% of whatever photons are actually I am transmitting, 31% are actually getting reflected back inside the material itself. Only the remaining part is actually, they are only getting transmitted to the air. Correct? So this is what the intuition, I mean this is what the numerical is actually telling us, what this value of gamma is actually denoting. Correct? So I hope it is very much clear. So now we will be, what we will do is we won't take a break today. I am just left with 2 or 3 slides. Once they are done, we will just close the session for today, because I don't want to take a lot of time from you guys, because you have an exam coming on the Sunday, right? So now what we'll do, we will just see what we have seen in the laser. We won't go into a very detailed working of the laser, that is the theoretical part. What we are interested in, these particular graphs that you are seeing on this particular column. Correct? So now what sir said, what did we studied about the laser? Okay, so LED's emission spectrum is actually relatively broader, correct? But I don't want to have a spectrum like this. I want to focus my light only at a particular wavelength. I want, just give me a second. I want to get a spectrum which is as sharp as this. Correct? I want to get a spectrum which is as sharp as this. Correct? So in the simple circuits manner, what you can say is I want to reject these frequencies, and I want a circuit which can select only this particular frequency over here. So now what I have to do, I have to make sure that there is a positive feedback in the circuit for this particular frequency, so that the amplitude of this circuit, so that amplitude of this frequency, that is this wavelength, will keep on building up, and the other amplitudes will keep on decreasing. Correct? That is how we thought about this, about the laser. We said that it is nothing but a positive feedback system which will select a particular wavelength and it will give a rejection to other particular wavelengths. Correct? And how did we select this wavelength now? So we said that we have a length, correct? We have a length L that is given in this particular structure, and correspondingly what modes we will get, what modes I mean, what frequencies, what wavelengths this laser will emit, right? This will be coming out from this particular equation, correct? And these are nothing but all the wavelengths, like when all the wavelengths which satisfy this relation, that is integer multiple of the wavelength equal to length, that is denoted over here, only those wavelengths are going to be supported by the laser, correct? But okay, those wavelengths are going to be supported, so this is highlighted over here. But what did we say? We just want to select one of the wavelengths, correct? So now I want to make sure that there is a good positive feedback for this particular frequencies, and for other frequencies the gain that I will be getting from the positive frequencies, it will actually decrease. So my gain graph should look something like this, and it should be focused on the wavelength that I actually want to emit out of the laser, correct? And this is the same graph that you are seeing over here. So once you multiply two of them, correct, you will see that there will be a dominant wavelength that the laser will be transmitting, and some other lambdas which are actually satisfying these relations, correct? Now why is this so important to us? Because of course we want to solve some numericals, but apart from that, LED's spectrum is very much broad, correct? And we want to make sure that we are actually transmitting most of the power at a particular wavelength only, correct? Sir must have given you the examples of, let's say lambda 1 is there, lambda 2 is there, lambda 3 is there. So now instead of transmitting at only a single wavelength, what you are doing is you are transmitting the information at different wavelengths like this, correct? This is nothing but the wavelength division multiplexing that we do in all the optical fibers, correct, to increase the data rate, correct? And this is the reason why we want to use the laser rather than using the LED, correct? We just want to concentrate the power at a single wavelength rather than distributing that power across multiple wavelengths, correct? So now coming to this particular case, what is of interest to us in solving the numericals is this particular distance, correct? This is the distance between two longitudinal modes, correct? This is very much similar to when you tie the string, right? When you tie the string to the one end of the wall, and if you try to generate a ripples on the string, correct, then you observe different modes over there. What modes will be supported? Again the same kind of equation will help you over there. So this equation is you can basically do an analogy and compare both these cases, this particular case and the string case where the one end is tied to the wall, correct? So just remember this. We will just solve a very simple numerical on this and we will close the session. So the distance between these two modes that you are seeing over here, it is nothing but the lambda square by 2L, correct? And L is nothing but the length of this distance, correct, the cavity that you are seeing over here. So L is nothing but this distance that is present inside this cavity. So this will be given in the question. Okay, so now let's solve the last numerical for this particular session and then we will close the session for today. So now what is this numerical asking us? If the photon output of a laser diode is equal to the band gap energy, correct? So it is telling us that we know lambda is nothing but hc by Eg, correct? The photon output of a laser diode is equal to band gap energy. That means that I have a material with me, gallium arsenide laser. So corresponding to its band gap, whatever photons I will be getting, I will be having a particular wavelength for that, correct? So now corresponding to this, they are asking me to find the wavelength separation between adjacent resonant modes in the gallium arsenide laser with L is equal to 75 micrometer, correct? So this is the separation that we have between the adjacent resonant modes. So this separation, let me just write, separation is nothing but delta is equal to lambda square by 2L. First of all, I have to find the value of lambda, right? How will I find it? I will find it from over here, correct? So now the lambda will be nothing but, for the gallium arsenide, the band gap you should be knowing, it is 1.42 electron volts. So Hc I can put it as 1.24 electron volts, correct? The lambda will come out to be in micrometers then, and my Eg is 1.42 electron volts, correct? So if I just divide both of them, then the lambda will come out to be 0.873 micrometers. This is the value of lambda that I got. Correct? Now what is my job? I have to substitute back over here because my ultimate aim is to find out the distance between the adjacent resonant modes, which is given by the delta over here. So delta will be what? Lambda square, that is 0.873 square. Let me also write units on the side, micrometer square, divided by 2 into L. What is the L? 75 micrometer. So upon micrometer over here. So the separation will also come out to be in micrometers. So now if you solve this, right, you will get it as 5.82 into 10 to the power minus 3 micrometer. So this separation between the two modes, right, it will come out to be around 5.82 nanometers. So this is the separation that you will be getting between the two adjacent resonant modes. Okay, so this was the last numerical for today, guys. If you have any questions, then I'm happy to clear any of the questions that you have. So any doubts, guys? This was the last problem for today. Okay, you're welcome, Mr. Vinod. Any doubts? Was there anything that was not clear in this particular session? Do you want me to repeat any numerical, any lattice matching? Was that graph clear? Any doubt in any slide, any numerical? Okay, last call for the doubts, guys. Any doubts? Okay, we will wrap up the session then. Thanks to all for staying here, and we will meet on Friday. We will have one more session. That will be the last session for this course. So do join that session, guys. Thanks a lot. Take care. Bye bye. You're welcome.